family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. 14 to 40,000. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
Tell me you've never stood in front of the mirror and practiced what you were about to say, maybe to your boss, maybe in front of a big presentation, maybe to your spouse or even to your kids. Okay, maybe you didn't do it in front of the mirror, maybe you did it in front of the phone, or you did it in the car while you're on your way, or while you were walking the dog around the block. You were replaying in your head the same answer that you were about to give. Nobody's actually heard this yet. It's just you, and it's just in your head. But you're still practicing it, rehearsing it before you deliver it. Tell me you've never done that before. I don't think I'll believe you. But you can tell me if you want to. And that's exactly what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and when I talk about the story power method, the second thing that I talk about is stagecraft. Now, stagecraft includes a whole lot of stuff like your verbal quality, your intonations, your pacing, the pitch of your voice, bizarre things like that, because all of those have the ability to connect you or disconnect you from the audience that you're trying to communicate with. If you talk in a sing-songy voice to people who are very professional people, you're going to lose them. If you speak in a monotone voice to a young audience, they're not going to pay any attention to you at all. You'll be like the Visine commercial or, Bueller, anyone. That is not what you want from a communication standpoint. But here's the only thing worse, and that is to find yourself in front of the audience unsure of what you're going to say. Maybe you've written it all down. Maybe you even have the slides in front of you, but perhaps you've experienced that moment where you think you're going to read from the slides, or you think you're going to at least be able to see your laptop or iPad or your notes in front of you, and then you find yourself in a spot where none of that is available. Well, in a big presentation, that's a problem. You know where it's a bigger problem? When you get cornered with the same kind of questions that were in your presentation and you don't have any notes. You're not expected to have any notes when you're standing in the lobby before the event, when they catch you in the green room before you go on stage, when they catch you in the hallway between events, or after you've just spoken. They're like, you mentioned XYZ, and I'm really curious about that. Tell me a little more about it. And you're trying to sort through your head. Well, let's see, that was point number 3A1. Give me just a second. And in your mind, you're trying to go back through your notes. See, here's what has happened. You have delivered a script rather than lived a message. There's a reason that leaders may seem sometimes be mumbling to themselves. It's a point of clarity. A lot of times, leaders will take a story, a message, an anecdote, an illustration, and pound on it like a meat tenderizer until it is so smooth, until it is so perfected. Now, maybe they started with a script. They started with notes on their phone or notes on a postcard or an outline or a presentation of some sort. But chances are they have been over this story, this moment, this anecdote, this illustration 10,000 times. They have rehearsed that story in their head that anecdote, those facts, the data that's associated with it so many times that the worst thing you could accuse them of is that their data is from yesterday and not today, or maybe from a couple of weeks ago. Chances are, though, if they know that the data point is a point in time and that the data is constantly being updated, they're going to know when that data point was. And they're going to be able to tell you. In fact, if they're smart enough, they'll even weave that into the story. They might say something like, the most recent history on this is, or the most recent data on this is, and here's how I know. And then here's what we've learned since then, but the data simply hasn't been updated. Now, if they are clever enough and wise, they will know the data, they'll know the impact that it's going to make, and they will have already buried that in the story in such a way that as they're telling you the story, the facts are also represented in true life experiences, true life parts of the story, where they can say, here's how I encountered that data, or here's what our team found in the research. The ability to build that into the story is near impossible to do on the fly. Now, if you're a really good communicator and you're a really good storyteller, and you can move that kind of stuff on the fly where you could take a data set and integrate it to a story you've already rehearsed, then you're already a top-level communicator. But most people need to rehearse at least the mindset of where in the story does it fit? How do the elements of the story, the new product development, the new team that we've hired, the third party that we're now bringing on board with this project, the new vendors or the new clients? See, all of those require a story. All of those require taking a little bit of time to develop the explanation, the vision, what's next. And all of those are going to take the leader's ability to articulate, here's how we're going to serve the client, here's the services we're going to provide them, this is the outcome that we're looking to achieve, here's the strategies that we intend to employ to pull this off. Now, what I need from you is this. If that just comes across as bullet points, there are certain people who will dive right into that and they'll feel just fine. But then there are those who are going to want to know a little bit more. They're going to want to be emotionally involved. They want to know what it's going to feel like when this is done. And that's the job of the leader to communicate. Sometimes that same story will need to be told with a little twist or a little modification, a little nuance to it, to the board. Because the board is the one who has to approve the investments to pull it off. Sometimes that needs to be told to clients. I've got to be able to explain to the client how we're going to serve them. Not just how will they benefit from our service, but what services are we going to use for them? Again, you can tell that in bullet points, and certain of your clients, it'll go right over their head, or they'll feel like you're just reading them a menu. But when you can embed that in a story, and you can give them a picture of what that's going to look like when it's done, you can help them to feel the success that's sitting on the other side of this project or service for them. You're going to win a whole lot more clients that way. And that same set of stories will convince the board to invest, will convince the client to hire you, will convince the people on the team to participate in that. So why do leaders rehearse the story? Because a leader knows that even when the environment changes, when the environment changes from the lobby of the hotel, from the lobby of the big presentation, to sitting around dinner, trying to get the deal closed, making sure that you've answered all of their questions, that the unrehearsed story has pitfalls. You want to know what the biggest pitfall of an unrehearsed story is? Ad-lib. Ad-lib. You may have heard criminals say, we need to make sure that we have the same story. Let's rehearse our story. And the challenge is a good interrogator can tell you when the story is so rehearsed that all 5 witnesses seem to have exactly the same story, the same pauses, the same commas, the same breaks, the same thoughts, the same expressions. Well, in a criminal investigation, that's a telltale sign that you're gonna be in trouble because your story seems rehearsed. But if you've got 5 people in your team and they're trying to answer the same sets of questions for the different levels of people, maybe one's answering questions for the marketing department, another for the sales department, another for the finance department, and they can come back to the same services, the same illustrations, time and time again, and they're on the same page with you, even with their own little nuances of personality, even with their own little nuances of, this is sitting over dinner, not in a boardroom. This is face-to-face in the parking lot with this one individual who's asking me questions after hours, or they're sending me text messages just to wrap things up. There's always a chance that you're going to make a proposal, and that proposal is going to look different from one perspective than it is to another. I'll give you an example of how the story versus the implication or implementation can be drastically different. On a regular basis, over the 20-something years that we've owned an AV company, I've had many clients who will say to me, well, we just need a mic. Okay, you need a microphone. So if I were to literally show up at the event with one microphone, but no mixing board and no speakers, what good would one microphone be? Well, that requires another question, right? A needs assessment of sorts. So when I began to ask, well, so tell me a little bit about your event. How do you see the whole thing coming together? Give me a picture of the highlight of the event. And then suddenly I hear, well, we have this singer who's coming in, and they're absolutely phenomenal, and and she has this great piano player, and they use this little beatbox thing to bang on. It's like a drum kit, but it's not drums. It's just a box, and sometimes they have a guitar, but not always. Great. Okay, so how many singers do they have? Oh, well, all of them sing. They're all going to sing into one microphone? Oh, no. I guess we need more than one microphone. See how suddenly the story changes from the original viewpoint, because most people think, well, obviously we have a stage, we have someone presenting, we're going to need a microphone. But all the nuances around the event require a little more knowledge. When I go into a presentation like that and I'm asking those questions, I kind of expect that to unfold that way. I don't expect them to have everything lined out. Now, there are people that I performed with. I've provided sound for Salt and Pepper. She had a 4-page attachment of everything, right down to the brand name of the dual turntables that she wanted to work with. If you know specifically what you want, that's fine. But see, sometimes what you hear in the story is, oh yeah, we're going to provide everything you need. We'll have everything. It'll all be itemized. Great. What is everything and what does itemized look like? Because sometimes in the industries, what you'll find is itemized to one person means I need a microphone. Itemized to another means I need to know what brand of microphone. Is it a talking microphone? Is it a headset microphone? Is it a handheld microphone? Will there be more than one of them? If I decide to have a panel and have 8 people on stage, are we all sharing one microphone? Will you have sanitation wipes so that we don't sneeze on each other as we pass the microphone from one person to the other? See, the story of what the event will look like paints a picture. It's a vision. It requires more detail. And if you're the buyer, you should have a story that says, in the ideal scenario, I see this. This is my vision. We'll start like this, we'll end like this, and in the middle we'll have all these things. That's a very important aspect of getting what you want from your service providers and knowing if they can even see the vision that you have and deliver what it is that you want. Sometimes, though, the storyteller needs to be on the other side of that to say, I remember doing an event for someone one time, and they said to me, we'd love to have the big video behind us. Okay, well, what do you mean by big video behind you? Do you mean a projector and screen because your room's not deep enough for that? Or do you mean the video on a flat LED wall because those are really, really bright, which means you got to have stage lights in the front if you're going to film? Are you planning to film? Oh, we hadn't thought about filming. Yeah, we would love to film. Can we film? Is that something you can do? Oh, see, it's that needs assessment, but it's the story. So I remember this one time we set up a giant video screen, but the customer's logo was white. And so everybody was backlit really, really well, but we had to put spotlights on them from the front because they had this giant light behind them and the wall was lit up behind them. And what happened when we put the big spotlights on were that the main person on the stage, they didn't like having lights in their face because they couldn't see the audience. And so we had to turn the big lights off, which completely destroyed the video. Is that a story or is that a sales pitch? And the answer is yes. But it's a story that I've been over in my head enough to say, I'm not humiliating anybody, I'm not embarrassing anybody, I'm not accusing anybody, I'm just letting the story be told because it makes the great point that helps to suss out what the need is. Now, if you've been in leadership any period of time, I can tell you that stories just like that can close deals. Stories just like that can make or break your hiring process. Stories just like that will make or break your next round of funding when you're looking for people to invest in what you do, whether it's the board or it's outside angel investors. And if you haven't walked through a process to learn of all the things that you've experienced in your business, which stories are the most important stories to select? Then how do you put those stories together in a way that not only do you become comfortable telling them again and again and again, but you know who they're going to connect with and how they're going to serve and how they're going to answer the question. You also know that if you need to make those stories adaptable within the organization for other people to tell, it's going to be a huge deal. I remember when I worked in sales at a particular company, they had an award that they had received. And everything we did, we were supposed to mention that award. To this day, I can't tell you the name of that award, and I can't tell you what it represented. And part of the reason that I can't was even though it was written into our sales script that we were supposed to mention that we had won this coveted award, not one customer I mentioned it to could care less. It was like saying, look at me, I got the big giant brownie button. And they went, so what? Can you help me with this problem? And so it was a story. It was written into our sales script. We were determined that everybody in the world would know about this award, and nobody cared about it. It had no resonance. It had no power. And so even though it came from the highest levels and all the way down through the marketing departments and our sales leadership and the sales transcript of conversation on a phone call, the only people who cared about it were the ones at the top who actually were given the award. If the story that you're telling as the leader seems irrelevant in that face-to-face conversation where transactions are taking place, where people are being hired, where new clients are coming on board, where your products are actually being sold, where new business partners are coming together with you. If the story isn't relevant there, find another story. But if the story is crafted in such a way or made up on the spot in such a way that nobody else could ever repeat it, then you have a different kind of a problem. Because you own that story in such a way that nobody else could ever retell it. No one else could share it again. You'll hear me right here on this podcast from time to time share stories that I've read in John Maxwell's books. And I always give credit for those. That I've read in Jack Canfield's books. And I always give credit for those. Why? Well, because they're their stories. But when their story makes a better point than anything that I've lived through, that's the story that I'm going to use. Your sales team, your marketing team, your HR team should have exactly the same leeway to be able to say, the CEO tells the story better than anybody else, but let me tell you what the facts are behind the story, what the event was that led to this. It can make an enormous difference in the quality of the brand consistency within your organization. So why do leaders rehearse stories? Because they want to pound out all the kinks in it. They want to think to themselves as they're telling the story, would I really say it that way in front of a crowd? Whether the crowd is 2 people or 2,000 people, would I really say it that way in front of a crowd? Would I allow my emotions to overcome me like that, whether it's frustration or anger or deep sorrow or sadness or elation? You know, we all tell stories from time to time that there's a certain turning point in the story that makes us want to laugh and cry at the same time. That emotional moment can be overwhelming, and in the wrong audience, it can betray us. In the right audience, it's very endearing. Rehearsing that again and again allows us to know when I get to that part of the story, am I going to get emotional or not? And in the audience I'm about to present to, is that going to be a good thing? And does that transfer if someone else tells that story? Are they going to have the same kind of emotional reaction? That's why leaders rehearse stories. You can't just make up a story on the fly and have a good quality story. Some people are really good at that. Some of them are deceptive masters at making up things on the fly that have no truth or evidence to them at all. The best ones are stories that are well rehearsed actually lived, where the emotional experiences are real. But they've also been rehearsed to work out the kinks and the emotional overwhelm that may surprise you in a story. There are also stories that are transferable. I want you to take some time as you think about the stories that you embed in your presentations, that you answer around the water cooler, the coffee shop, or in line at the grocery store, maybe in the lobby before a big presentation, or in the green room, or in front of the press. If you're not comfortable with the story that you're telling now, maybe you need another story. Maybe you're not comfortable with the story you're telling now because you haven't spent enough time with the story, in the mirror, in front of a video camera, recording yourself and listening back saying, does that even make sense? When you've done that several dozen times, the story will not only make sense to you, it'll be smoother for anybody else who's listening and transferable for those who matter. I hope you'll take the time to do that. And if you need some help with that, you can go straight to the website, storypowermasterclass.com. There is an assessment for your story just to kind of get a feel for how it is. 15-minute free phone call if you want that. Or you can download the Story Power Journal, which will kind of walk you through this 4-step process. And in step number 2, stagecraft, it'll give you some encouragement on how to rehearse your story. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.
Thank you.